I'm Heather Clayton. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction here in Pittsford.
And I'm Lindsay Ali. I'm the Director of Student Services.
And we're here to talk to you tonight about the habits of mind. And you may have heard some of this vocabulary used, but what we're hoping to accomplish tonight is to have you dig in, kind of recognize the 16 different habits of mind, learn the rationale for using them, experience some of the vocabulary and tips for use at home, and then down the road when your children bring this home, you'll have a solid understanding of what it is all about. Oops, this is sensitive. So the habits of mind are dispositions people use when confronted with problems or challenges. The researchers say it's what intellectual people do when faced with uncertainty. And the idea behind each of the 16 dispositions is that kids are using them from a young age with increasing sophistication, and they begin to internalize the habits, and it becomes a way of navigating challenges when they're in novel situations or encountering something that's unknown. Very often with our kids, that's when we see they struggle. When they don't know the answer, they fear failure. That's when we see some of that self-efficacy and engagement dip. But with the habits, it kind of equips them with the toolbox they need to face those challenges. So there are 16 of them, and I'm not going to read each of them to you, but if you'll notice on this placemat, there's a picture icon, a description, and a definition. So what we're going to be doing tonight in a few minutes as we dig in is we're going to be giving you each of those pieces all scrambled up and having you kind of read the definitions, look at the icons, and look at the words and see if you can match them up and what you discover about them as you move through that process. Just to share a couple, because I know this is very hard to see, there are things up here like thinking flexibly, taking responsible risks. One of the big ones we see that comes up over and over again from K all the way till adulthood is managing impulsivity, that stop and think before you respond. Persistence is another big one that we see up there, that knowing when to abandon your plan because it's not working and knowing when to stay with something, persisting with a task to completion. The other big one that you'll see up there is metacognition. That's thinking about your thinking. So we're always having thoughts as we engage with tasks, but it's an awareness of those thoughts and kind of engaging with that self-talk when we are faced with challenges. You've probably seen or heard of the NYSED, the Portrait of a Graduate. So the New York State Education Department in July released a portrait of a graduate. And there are 6 different areas in which schools will be asked to measure how our students are doing against those criteria. There are things up there like, are they academically prepared? Are they creative innovators? Are they
Communicators.
I'm just having trouble seeing that. Are they strong communicators? Are they global citizens? Are they critical thinkers? If it helps you with the habits, the portrait is who our students are going to become by the time they leave us. The habits are how they're going to approach their learning to get there. And the idea behind the habits as a district is that we would begin with our youngest learners in kindergarten and use the vocabulary and the application of these habits all the way through to 12th grade. A 4th grader using a habit of mind on a math problem might look very different than a child using it in multivariable calculus, but nevertheless, they will have more cognitive space for that rich learning when they've internalized these habits at a younger age.
So when we think about why are we doing this work, where did it come from, how did we decide it was important, there's a lot of growing research and recognition around our students now and then what they're facing in the post-secondary world. And just thinking about how at this day and age, just mastering content and understanding subject matter is really not enough to produce productive members of society in the world that we live in now. With AI, really taking off. We're recognizing that businesses and even our graduates are all realizing that it is those soft skills, those interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills that are really what's most important for their success out in the real world. And so when we think about not just content, but self-regulation, problem-solving, and managing conflict, all of those pieces are what's important for navigating any situation that is posed to you. And so when Dr. Art Costa and Ben Akalik came up with these habits, thinking not just about schools or how to make successful students, but really thinking about what are these thinking dispositions that make people successful in the world. And that we call them habits because the more that we recognize them and practice them and talk about them, they become habitual, which is what we want. We don't want a student just to learn how to manage their impulse in the classroom. We want them to understand that that applies in any situation that they're in, and how to communicate with clarity and precision, and how to work interdependently is going to impact them in school, but also at home, and then in any scenario where they are with social interactions. So we found that this aligns not only with that portrait of a graduate, but that really we're seeing this is what the workforce, can you click forward, and what post-secondary students are looking for. So then the World Economic Forum just came out with an article in 2025 that really supported that these behaviors, this habits of mind, are really valued in the workplace. And so we're seeing that externally, we're being told this is what students really need to work on and to continue to learn in our schools. But then also we surveyed we survey our graduates. And so in our, can you click forward? In our postgraduate surveys, both in the 18-month postgraduate survey and in the 5-year postgraduate survey, our former students are telling us that we need to be better at this kind of work at school. So when we identified areas that they felt could be improved in Pittsford schools to prepare students for the future, that social and emotional intelligence came up across both surveys. So did that critical thinking and problem solving, and then some of that communication and collaboration. And that was consistent across the people who just graduated and the students that have been out for 5 years. So we just really recognize that this is an area that we have to start focusing on and integrating into our curriculum and into our work for our students here in Pittsford.
Just to also mention, it's a universal set of habits. So it will really tie us together with vertical alignment. It gives us a guarantee no matter what school you're in, no matter what age the child, will have this common vocabulary and habits. It doesn't change all the great things that are happening already in our schools. It just kind of overlays that and grounds us in universal language. Okay, so we're gonna dig in. If you don't have a buddy at your table, you're gonna wanna join another table. So, and I forgot to say this at the beginning, thank you so much to our board members and our building administrators and our superintendent, Kataya, that is here tonight, Nancy Wayman, Director of Communications. We appreciate them being here to engage in this work with us. So in the baggie, you're gonna see some chopped up pieces. You'll see the icons. In green, you will see the name of the habit, and then in white, you will see the definitions. So we wanted to give you about 15 minutes with a buddy, spread them out, take a look, and see how many matches you can make. We'll be around to help you persist with this challenge. And then we'll do some reflection after.
All right, and while I know you're still looking things over, which is fine, we're just gonna take a minute to reflect on how that went. So while you were working with your partner, maybe someone you know or don't know, what habits did you find yourself using to complete the activity? Go ahead. She answered one though. I was like, yeah, she's on track there. We were saying, what habit did you use? And you were talking about thinking flexibly, which I think is important, right? So we have to be able to kind of change and reread things and be okay if we've done something wrong or made a mistake and just work to fix it. So that's thinking flexibly is definitely one of the habits. What else did you find yourself doing during this activity? Yeah, remaining persistent. Great. Yes. You had to listen to each other. Yep, absolutely. You were working interdependently. You couldn't just take all the pieces and work on your own, right? Yes, exactly. And striving.
And you're still striving. We'll let you take us at home.
So when you were working, what habits did you find were the hardest to match? Either the definition or the picture? Which ones were hard for you? The pictures? Yeah, they're unique. They're creative.
I have some issues with a couple of them. I just don't agree.
So, yeah, some of them could be different. Yes.
There's ear, but it's not for the actual listening. And it just things that picture, it's easier to look at it in a different way.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. What other observations did you make as you dug through the 16 and looked at what they were and what their meanings were? What did you take away from some of these habits?
For me, it was really good to see this because this is the kind of thing I think, that I often think about that kids need to focus on because, it's more than just learning 2 plus 2 equals 4. When you enter the workforce, you have to work on teams, you have to work on projects, and that's the kind of stuff that I think, we need to be moving towards. So this stuff is, I think, welcome from all of us parents that, work on project teams, etc. Great. These are the exact skills that we're kind of inculcating in our workforce.
Thanks for sharing. Thank you. Anybody else? Is there any one of these habits that you read and was like, nope, I don't care if my kid can do that? They all seem important, right? Into some capacity. Yeah, even finding humor, I think, can be important and being able to kind of roll with the punches and that kind of thing. So I think that we can, while we may want to focus on some more than others or on different ones based on the age level we have or the subject that we teach, they're all important in some capacity and do apply to working outside of school. So we have a district-wide committee that has been working on a lot of this, did some of the work to find habits of mind and to see if we thought that aligned with what we were already doing. And we did a little bit of a crosswalk between what are some of the things we're already asking of our students and expecting of our students. So when we looked at the K-5 learning skills, we saw that there is great alignment between the habits of mind and what we are already measuring and looking for in our students. So working cooperatively, persevering through challenges is one exactly that as the same habit. Following written directions, transitioning smoothly. So some of these we could already take habits and put them right into what we're already working on and identifying in our students and helping them to learn throughout on top of the academic pieces. We did that also with the K-12 learning behaviors. Looking at engaging in learning experiences, meeting deadlines, which persisting and striving for accuracy would fall under those. Utilizing opportunities for feedback, reflection, and growth. So you have to be able to remain open to that continuous learning and take some responsible risks and academic risks. So we found that as a district, a lot of these habits did align to the work that we are already valuing and finding important. So then we looked into that this is really important to have consistency in all different settings, right? So when we think about what can this even look like at home, there's some of the examples that they give are helping your child at home to feel comfortable trying something new, doing something that might be hard, maybe just acknowledging this might not be easy or it doesn't look easy, it looks challenging, but that we can do it. So taking responsible risks and remaining open to that trying and persisting through tasks is something that we do regularly with our children at home. During homework time, I think sometimes it's hard to watch your child struggle, right? Or to see if they're getting frustrated or if they're just really not interested in doing homework right now. So kind of talking through, thinking about their thinking. What are some ways you've solved problems like this in the past? Or where are some ways that we've seen problems like this before? Maybe having them ask some questions, which is also a habit that we want to have students working on. So during homework time, we can integrate the habits. Sibling conflicts, I think listening is sometimes hard and managing our impulsivity, those kinds of things. But asking our children to just pause, to actually listen, to not interrupt so that you can hear what someone's feeling or thinking is really important as well. So carries over into the home. And then a few more things that we feel like can integrate really nicely at home for you.
So a big piece of all of this research is the importance of modeling, both in the classroom and children seeing it in their everyday lives. And this is hard for us to do sometimes, but your children learn by watching you. So when you face a challenge, you're going to kind of narrate your thinking. You know, this is frustrating. I'm going to try to persist, use a different approach. I understand this is hard to do in the moment when you might be feeling frustrated. Using the language of the habits is also really important. Instead of general good job, great work, try to be more specific and tie it to an actual habit so that it's feedback that kids can, it's action-oriented feedback. So I noticed you really persisted through that tough math problem, or you showed great flexibility when your plan didn't work. This is some of what we're seeing at K-5 with our new math program. There's a lot of productive struggle. There's a lot of interdependent thinking. There's a lot of problem solving. Children may have been used to the I do, we do, you do, and now it's I tell you a little bit, you do. We all have this collective conversation, and then we tie it up with explicit teaching points. So that's been a real shift for our kids, particularly in mathematics, but a great one as we've watched their thinking evolve over the school year. Will you click? Oh, asking thoughtful questions. So just prompting your child with things like, what's another way to think about that? Or what would happen if? So they could problem solve some different scenarios. Celebrate your mistakes. We want to embrace that growth mindset with our kids. You may not have it yet, but what did you learn from that, and how might you approach it differently next time? So these ideas come from the Habits of Mind Institute website. There's actually Habits of Mind for teachers, for leaders, for parents, for administrators. There's all different categories. There is actually a parent toolbox on there with a lot of resources, so that's where we drew some of these examples. Another suggestion is choose one habit of mind to focus on as a family. And then at the end of your day or when you get home from school or work, just sharing how the family used that habit, what went well, they're going to try differently next time. And just remain focused on the progress. During your everyday conversations, invite your child to think about how something feels easier when they employ a habit. When it used to be so hard to handle frustration, but now you learn to manage your impulsivity and take a breath and think through your options before responding, just as an example.
One of the things that we found that to be really helpful with the habits is that all of us can be working on these and can have strengths in some and need to practice others more regularly. And that as the adults in the classroom, we can be modeling that for the students as well too. And that sometimes if you forgot right now to manage your impulsivity, it's okay to call that out, and it doesn't mean that you're bad or that you did something bad. It just means that right now you weren't practicing that habit. And we think that that's going to be a really important piece for some of our restorative conversations around managing some of those behaviors in the classroom as well, and calling students out and holding students accountable of right now you're not really listening with empathy and understanding. And so then they can stop to think about, if we've used that language before and we've modeled and we've practiced it, then we know how to correct that action. So that's something at home that could carry over as well too, right? And even recognizing when you yourself may have not implemented the habit that you've been wanting to or that you've been practicing, but that means it's okay, you can recognize that and try again or go back to it. So one of the questions that came up when we sent out the Microsoft forms to sign up for this Power Hour, one of the questions that came up was really thought-provoking for Heather and I, that talked about understanding that these are really important traits for our students to learn and skills for our students to learn, but that we as adults play a really important role in that. And one of the questions was, as the adults in these children's lives, what are some things we do that help this, and what are some of the things we do that sabotage some of this work? And so we thought that was a really great question to just take a moment and really talk through in general, because we think that sometimes, life gets in the way, we get busy, we have lessons we want to teach and get through in a short amount of time. And so it's actually sometimes when we are feeling that pressure that maybe we do something for a student instead of helping them persist through a task. or we interrupt a conversation because we don't want to hear that conflict and we want to solve it for them. And so those are some of the things that we have to, as the adults in the situation, pause and stop ourselves from doing. Let our students have a little bit of struggle. Help them to understand that they have what's in them to work through this conflict or to finish this task. I think sometimes we're seeing that students, if they perceive something to be difficult, they're afraid to even try it. So really fostering that responsible risk of it's okay to try, even if we have a hard time with it, we can persist. So some of those things as the adults, that we just have to be able to pause for a second and feel a little bit of sometimes that uncomfortable feeling of watching a child or a student struggle, but understanding that it's through that struggle that they will have that growth and practice the habits so that they become innate. So just wanted to talk through that a little bit since it was a great question that was posed. So we have time for, we're actually a little early, ahead of schedule, but we do have time for other questions related to this content. There were a couple others that we can go through, or if people are here and want to ask them, that's fine too. So we can just open it up for questions.
I know at Jeff Road they're focusing on some throughout the year. Is it the same at all 5 buildings, or are principals kind of picking and choosing which ones they want to implement first at the building level?
Great
So
question.
while we all are working from the same 16, buildings can customize what their students need. So a particular grade level might be needing something that another grade level isn't, or a school might be working on something that another school isn't. So there is autonomy and choice with that. I think it's moving from that exposure to applying it in different situations, beginning to reflect on their own use of the habits, and just seeing that across different settings and different situations. It really, the research doesn't say you have to do it in this order, you need to start here. It's really just what is needed. And I think schools have found success in just prioritizing trends they've seen with their children and then aligning habits that would be helpful to move that forward.
Yeah, and I think what we feel is important as a district is that just to have the consistent language K-12, so that as kindergartners are starting to, and they're so cute, they already start to use the language. We have lots of kids talking about managing their impulsivity or thinking flexibly, but that by the time they get to high school, that will have been such common language that when a high school teacher does use it to pose how they respond to a piece of literature, that it is that habit, that habitual. So we're just excited to have the K-12 consistent language, but we do want some autonomy in the buildings to do what they see their students right in front of them need to focus on most. And lots of schools do it in different ways. Some might only pick a few, some might do all 16, but have like a power habit and a supporting habit. And so lots of different ways to do it, but just getting that language and exposure is our main priority right now.
Sorry, I probably missed this. I walked in a few minutes late. Just wondering, is it something that's going to be reflected in report cards, or is it something that is just kind of being done in the background? And is it affecting all grade levels, or is it just affecting certain grade levels? Are there pilot classrooms, etc., where we pilot it, see if it works before implementation everywhere, or is it something that's going to be rolled out all at once? And is there, any changes in what we as parents might expect to see?
Sure. So currently our report card indicators, particularly around learning skills and learning behaviors, already align with the habits. So while there's no immediate push to change those, over time we might find that the language needs to morph or ebb and flow based on our descriptions of our children as learners. We have had some schools piloting already and using the language and doing explicit teaching and the visuals and have found great success. And as we have begun to think as a district around what are our universal guarantees for all students in our system, a really important part of that is the social emotional learning competencies. And what we really like about this is it's free. It's backed by over 30 years of research. It's been applied worldwide. There are great resources at our fingertips, and it's not something that you're jamming into an overcrowded curriculum. It's authentically integrated to enhance our work. Particularly with AI becoming such a force of discussion at 612 especially, AI could either erode or enhance what we're doing. These habits are going to be really important as our students are making decisions about how they engage with artificial intelligence. And am I using it to offload cognitive things that are okay for me to offload, or do I need to own that cognitive piece and not be using it in that way? So we've been talking a lot about academic integrity as a district, and also just how our teachers are explicitly teaching language of academic integrity, application of AI in different scenarios, but that's where these will overlay so nicely too with the decision making around that. So lots of implications and opportunity, and we're just kind of taking it one step at a time and seeing where it leads us.
Sorry, just to follow up on that. You mentioned, I think, when I walked in, I heard something about portrait of a graduate. And so does this tie into that? Does this kind of lead us towards that? And then
Yes.
Is there expectation that over time our report cards will change and what parents, or how kids are evaluated will change?
Yeah, so I'll go back to that slide. So if the portrait is telling us when our kids graduate, they should be this. Part of the transformations for New York State is that we establish multiple pathways for our students to be successful, and we measure their success in different ways. So that work is starting with our Instructional Leadership Council, which is a K-12 group with parent representation, and we're digging into the portrait and figuring out what are these different areas that our students are going to need to demonstrate. But in concert with that, we have a secondary group that's looking at our assessment practices and our grading practices to see how they need to morph and flow. If we're offering students multiple pathways for success and we are gathering evidence of student learning in different ways, then we have to respond with a system that's going to support that. So we're in the research phases of that, but I imagine there will be changes that align with where our students are heading post-graduation, but just so we're in alignment and we're speaking the same language. We don't want our grading system to erode all the great work that we're doing, giving our kids multiple ways to demonstrate mastery. Yeah.
I just want to say something because two of my kids graduate from Minden High, and the language, maybe it's not as a language there, but the skills when I look, they all had it by the time they graduate from the school. Yes, we don't use those words, but when you come to any projects that they would work on, they're using all the skills. So I don't know if it's like it's a habit of mind or it's more actually a skill embedded inside the curriculum to be able to carry whatever you learned and apply it with your own skills. And it has been done, and I think it's just now we're recognizing that the language more.
Right, and it's how do you display these habits or these thinking dispositions in different curricular areas? How are you thinking like a historian? How are you thinking like a scientist? How are you thinking like an artist? What does it look like in each of these settings? Responding with wonderment and awe might look very different in chemistry than it does in art. So it's really, we're, as a district, really thinking about what are those broad transfer skills that our kids need to have that cross all disciplines versus just those content-specific, discrete skills that don't have, you know, they're not applicable in multiple settings. So we've been really having a lot of those conversations in all of our committees and the work that we've been doing around the transformations from New York State.
And I think some of tying the language to the work we're already doing, when we did share this with some of the teacher leadership and, you know, for example, in math, they're already talking about striving for accuracy, right? So I think what we're doing with implementing this part and having the consistent language K-12 is just guaranteeing that all of our students are making those connections, hearing that language and understanding those pieces really explicitly. Not that we're not already doing the work, but that we're really calling attention with that consistent language and vocabulary to what that looks like in math versus in physical education or out on the playground, right? And that some of that transfer skill piece.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's my first. So a lot of this is kind of working towards project-based work because a lot of our academic, beyond high school, I think education relies on that, especially in STEM and everything. And then a lot of workforce is relying on that as well. Is there expectation that over time our curriculum will evolve in other ways beyond just mentioning and use of language, but actually engage students in project-based work more and more? Because that's kind of where they're going to be headed as they enter the workforce. And all of these things, teamwork, all of those things in terms of communication, clarity, all of that comes together in project-based work. It's an opportunity to practice all of these things.
So that is the work right now, especially at our 612 assessment group. It was the grading committee, but now we're the assessment and grading committee because we're really digging into what are the ways that we're going to measure student success, and could it potentially be a pathway where a child does a capstone project at 8th grade or at 12th grade. We have our senior inquiry projects that our students do for ELA, but how could that also be potentially credit bearing or feed into other disciplines? So we've been having conversations, for example, we're going to begin with the seal of biliteracy next year, which is something students can earn when they demonstrate literacy in English and a second language. So part of that is they can take a Regents, they can do a presentation. There's a number of different ways to demonstrate mastery. So all of our work is heading in that direction. The state is moving us in that direction, but we are also moving in that direction when we see all these opportunities for integration and meaningful work for our kids to mirror what they're going to experience in the real world. So the short answer is yes. And it's, part of the plan. We're going to be doing a lot of work around our strategic initiative this summer. All of that is like our mission, vision, values, and our direction. So we're all in sync, rowing in the same direction.
I think you mentioned a little bit more the social emotional learning and how this is, I still do not get the connection between the emotion. I feel like it's a little bit different when we explain the emotional, the social emotional learning and the habit of mind. I don't know if you want to tell me a little bit more about the connection in between.
Sure. I think that when we talk about social emotional learning specifically has 5 competencies that we look at, which is your self-awareness, your ability to have peer connection and peer interaction, those kinds of things. And so I think where we see the connection and some of the overlap is that by practicing these habits, we're going to see that impacts how a student reflects on themselves and their self-awareness, how they listen and engage with other people, how they problem solve. So we feel that this work gets to those competencies. They align really greatly with the SEL framework that we're expected to follow as well. So we feel that this work and integrating this language and these habits addresses all of those pieces from the 5 competencies for social emotional learning. Now, that doesn't mean that some students might need more instruction or different instruction or more supports for those pieces, but that again, at that first level of instruction, that we can guarantee all students are having that basic instruction of how to listen and manage impulses and manage conflict and problem solve, those kinds of things.
The habits are in service of those competencies. So in order to have self-awareness or self-control, you need to demonstrate some of these habits. So the interconnectedness is really powerful between the Castle SEL benchmarks, between the habits, between the portrait. There's such powerful overlap, which gives us such a great opportunity.
Okay. Well, that's all we have for you this evening. So thank you so much for taking time to come out. We appreciate you being here.